Shalom, and welcome to Sedra Summary. This is the pilot of a new series of Sedra Summary designed for YouTube. Sedra Summary is available as a weekly email with a detailed summary of the Sedra and associated Midrash. These also appear on the website, sedrasummary.com. In this series, we hope to deliver the summary of the Sedra and some of the Midrashim in video form. For those of you who enjoy watching and listening to videos on YouTube. So let us begin at the beginning with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. God began to create heaven and earth from inchoate land, water, and darkness, transcended by God's Spirit. God called forth light and considered it good. God separated light from darkness, calling light day and darkness night. There was evening, then morning, one day. God called forth an expanse within the water, separating water below the expanse from water above the expanse. God called the expanse heaven. There was evening, then morning, a second day. God called for the gathering of water from under heaven, so that dry land would appear. God called the dry land earth, and the waters seas, and considered it good. God called for the sprouting of vegetation, herbs producing seed, and trees bearing fruit containing their own seed, and considered it good. There was evening, then morning, a third day. God called forth lights in the expanse of heaven to separate day from night, to serve as signs for seasons, days, and years, and to shine upon the earth. Two great lights, the greater to rule by day, and the lesser to rule by night, and the stars. God considered it good. There was evening, then morning, a fourth day. God called for the water to abound with living beings, and for the birds to fly over the earth across the expanse of heaven. God created the giants of the sea, all kinds of moving living creatures from the water, and birds of wing, and considered it good. God blessed them to be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and for the birds to multiply on earth. There was evening, then morning, a fifth day. God called for the earth to produce every kind of living being, cattle, moving things, and wild beasts, and God considered it good. God further considered, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." God created man in his image, male and female. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living creatures that move upon the earth." I give you and all living animals of land and sky, the vegetation producing seed upon earth, and trees bearing fruit producing seed for you to eat. God considered all that he had made very good. There was evening, then morning, the sixth day. Heaven and earth and all their array were complete. God was finished on the seventh day with all of the work that he had done. God rested on the seventh day and blessed it as the holy day. You might have noticed that light apparently was created twice. On the first day, God brought forth light, but then on the fourth day, God created the luminaries in heaven, the sun and the moon and the stars, and they radiated light. So the rabbis wondered, why was light created on both days? Most of the rabbis thought that the light that was described on the first day was the same thing as the light that was described on the fourth day, just that on the first day the luminaries were created, then on the fourth day they were placed in heaven. But Rabbi Elazar taught a different view. He said that the light that God created on the first day was a light with which we today are not familiar. This was a light by which Adam and Eve, who would be created on the sixth day, could see from one end of the world to the other. It was a completely revealing light. But God foresaw that sinfulness would eventually come to the world, and therefore he decided to withhold that light, the light of the first day, and save it for the righteous of the future. The light of the fourth day is the light that we use on an everyday basis. And the rabbi saw in a very famous verse in the book of Psalms, in chapter 97, verse 11, Or Zarua Lat Tzaddik, light is sown for the righteous, which in its context in Psalms simply seems to mean that God stores up light as a reward for the righteous. The rabbis, Rabbi Elazar, that is, interpreted that verse to mean that refers to the light that was created on the first day, that God has sown, he has planted, and it is ready to produce its benefit for the righteous of the future. There also is in the Zohar a description of how this light might figure in to the world as we know it, even on a regular basis. Rabbi Yossi said that that light was completely hidden after the first day, much as Rabbi Elazar taught. But Rabbi Yehuda taught that if that light had been hidden entirely, the world would not have been able to exist for even a single moment. In other words, that light is more than just the light that reveals forms to our eyes. It is a light that gives the world its meaning. It was hidden, he said, as a seed is planted and produces offspring, and from it the world is currently sustained. There is not a day that it does not enter the world and sustain it. By this light of the first day, the Holy One, blessed be He, nourishes the world. And Rabbi Yehuda did what the Darshanim, the creators of the Midrash, do with biblical verses, except that he applied it to a sentence that's in our Siddur, in our prayer book, Uvetuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. God, in His goodness, renews every day continually the work of creation. He interpreted the word uvetuvo to mean not necessarily in context in His or in God's goodness, but rather in its goodness, in the goodness of this light of the first day, does God renew each day continually the work of creation. Rabbi Yehuda went on to say that wherever they toil through the night in the study of Torah, one thread of that hidden light spreads over them. And he applied the verse from Psalms chapter 42, verse 9, by day the Eternal extends His goodness, when at night the song of His Torah is with me, in much the same way that he applied the sentence from the Siddur. He read, instead of His goodness, that is God's goodness, he read it as its goodness, that is to say, the goodness of that hidden light. By day, the Eternal extends its goodness, when at night the song of His Torah is with me. Even when we are in darkness, the darkness of the night, or when the world is dark, or when our own world is dark, Rabbi Yehuda understands the teaching here to be that whenever we seek through the Torah the light that God hid for us on the first day, we illumine our days, and our night can be as bright as the day. When the eternal God created heaven and earth, there were not yet plants in the earth, and herbs of the field had not sprouted, because the eternal God had not brought rain upon the land, and there was no man to work it. Only a mist from the ground watered the earth. The eternal God formed the man, dust from the earth, and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, so that the man became a living being. The eternal God planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and placed the man there. The eternal God brought up from the ground in the garden every beautiful tree with good food. The eternal God placed the man in the Garden of Eden to work it and to care for it. When the Holy One, blessed be He, created the first man, He took him around his world and showed him the trees of the Garden of Eden. God said to the man, "See my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are, and all that I have created for you. Therefore, take care not to destroy my world, for if you ruin it, there will be no one after you who can repair what you have destroyed." The Midrash then cites the biblical sage Kohelet, whom we also know as Ecclesiastes, in chapter 7, verse 13 of his book, "Accept and respect the work of God, for who can settle what he has convolved?" In other words, who can figure out, in simple terms, the complexity of the world that is the work of God? Ecclesiastes was pondering the wondrousness of God's creation, and that should be reason enough not to tamper with the balance of nature by thoughtless and exploitative acts. But in order to drive his point home to the issue of human behavior, the Darshan, the author of the Midrash, interprets Ecclesiastes' words a little differently from their plain meaning. Instead of "who can make straight the complexities that he, God, has created," the Darshan reads the verse, "who can straighten out the mess that he, the careless or exploitative human being, has created." This is one good example of how Midrash works. It construes biblical words literally and apparently out of context in order to apply their underlying principle to human behavior. Here, the sage's appreciation of the delicate complexity of creation is shown to the first man as a gift which God implores him to protect.
השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, מפס יקר זכה וברה, זכה וברה, מפס יקר זכה וברה, זכה וברה. נאם השמו בחר בעמו, נאם השמו בחר בעמו, להיות לו לשמו, להיות לו לשמו, אומני וחרה. השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, מפס יקר זכה וברה, זכה וברה, מפס יקר זכה וברה, זכה וברה. נגלה בכבודו על סיני הודו, נגלה בכבודו על סיני הודו, קרא לעבדו, קרא לעבדו לקבל תורה. השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, מפס יקר זכה וברה, זכה וברה, מפס יקר זכה וברה, זכה וברה. ישמח ישראל באהבת אל, ישמח ישראל באהבת אל, כי הוא מנחיל אל, כי הוא מנחיל אל לומדי התורה. השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, השורש שירה לכבוד התורה, kara zaka uvara zaka uvara